What's happening, guys? Welcome to Let's Talk Comics. This morning I'm just out here walking and talking. I was getting my steps in for this Sunday morning. I figured I would do a little video as well, talk about a couple things that went on with comic books this week. First thing I want to talk about is I hit 100 subscribers this week, which was incredibly exciting to me. So I want to thank everybody that subscribes and watches. 100 subscribers. I felt like it would never happen, and even if it had never happened, I don't really care. I do this because I really love comic books, and comic books have played such a huge part in my life for over 40 years. Just turned 50 this year, and it's very hard to remember points in my life when comic books weren't a part of it. It seems like they have always been there. By and large, it's been, non-stop. There's only been, a small gap when I wasn't actively reading, and that was due to financial reasons and a couple of particularly crazy time in my life in the early 2000s. I was out of comic books altogether for about 2 or 3 years. So, but by and large, outside of that, like I said, I just turned 50 this year. For all of 40 years, comic books have been a mainstay. So it's a joy to talk about them, and it's a joy to, record my thoughts and feelings about things in the comic book industry and share them. Sometimes I'll see other people's videos and I think, wow, that looks great. Mine is just me talking on a phone, unscripted, no producers, but that's kind of how I like it. I've always said that I wanted my videos to feel like just conversation at the comic book shop. Like you're at the shop and you're just shooting the shit with the guys there. And so that's kind of why. And the other thing is, I'm not in this for money. This is just a fun gig or whatever. I don't want to sink any money into this, but like I said, I really want to thank everyone that follows this channel, and it's really cool to see that number hit 100. So what else has happened in comic books this week? I saw that Marvel is relocating to the West Coast. New York City office is closing and moving to the West Coast. I've seen a lot of people say that it feels like the end of an era, which I guess it is, but I think that's probably more about nostalgia reasons or situations that we have in our head. It's not the days, as I said, the days of the bullpen are long gone. Everyone is essentially working from home or, working remote, emailing stuff, drawing on tablets, and doing, everything. Everything is remote and digital now. And it's been that way for quite a while. So I think a lot of that, people feeling it's the end of an era, is just more like nostalgia stuff or whatever. And the reality is, it's probably been that way for quite a while. But I do really associate Marvel with New York City, and of course you still can associate Marvel with New York City. Just because they moved to West Coast doesn't change anything. I mean, DC moved to West Coast about 10 years ago or whatever, and no one skipped a beat. No one was like, oh, Batman will never be the same, Superman will never be the same. And yeah, Gotham and Metropolis are fictional cities, but they were based upon parts of New York. You know, Metropolis was Manhattan. Gotham was some of the more, at the time, seedier sides of New York or whatever. But yeah, Marvel's always been known as, we give you comics that reflect the world outside your window. And for so much, I mean, I guess Spider-Man is really the last person who was centered or headquartered or whatever you want to call it in New York. You know, Avengers were living in a dead Celestial at one point. The days of the mansion in Central Park are long gone. So, but yeah, I kind of get what people are saying about being bummed out. But if we sit back and look at it, you know, I think that if we sit back and look at it realistically, you know, everyone had been working remotely for a long time, and that's kind of just fandom stuff we have in our head. You know, the bullpen days were long gone, and with Marvel being owned by Disney, you know, of course they're going to be closer to the home offices, so to speak. Just like when DC moved, because they're owned by Warner Brothers, they moved to the West Coast. But the only thing I will say about that is, Marvel, I understand, I'm cool with you moving to the West Coast, but don't give us some sort of shitty event to cover the move like DC did with Convergence. DC gave us one of the worst events, one of the worst stories ever with Convergence to cover the 2-month gap in which they were moving from East Coast to West Coast. Marvel don't do that. Convergence was terrible. It burnt me a lot on events. It really, Convergence and all the Secret Wars at the time, tie-ins, the Battle War tie-ins, that's what really turned me off on reading event crossovers and tie-ins. I got burnt so bad. They churned out so much stuff that I was reading, and a lot of it was not good. I said, you know what? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And that's when I really learned my lesson about event tie-ins. Let's see, what else happened? I saw that Marvel got a new editor, or editor-in-chief, or whatever. Somebody stepped down and somebody stepped up. And I saw a lot of people, you know, really excited. Some people really felt like, you know, who cares? This guy's going to suck too. And I think really time just will tell on all of it. You know, I think if you're the type of mindset that like, oh, I like the product Marvel's putting out right now. They've got some really good books. This change doesn't really make a difference to you one way or another. If you were someone who was like, Marvel's trash right now, then maybe this will help get your hopes up. But who knows? I mean, I think it all boils down to the creative team. It all boils down to creative teams. Teams were still, you know, you're still going to have great writers, great artists, working on great books. So, you know, I think as long as the talent is still working hard, whoever's in charge, you know, it's not going to make that big of a difference or whatever. It'll make some difference. I mean, I see some people say, well, you know, maybe they'll make books last longer than 7 or 8 issues or whatever, instead of having all these rapid fire cancellations. Which to that I say, I still have not seen one book that got canceled, with the exception of the Stephanie Phillips Planet She-Hulk book. Every book I've seen that got canceled early, I didn't really feel like it should have been left ongoing. You know, I think if we're real with ourselves, all these books that were canceled early, that was probably the right move. But with a change in leadership at Marvel, you know, who's to say it's going to pay off? Only time will tell. You know, let's see what else. More Marvel stuff. I saw more information about the Midnight line. They are going to have their variant cover initiative is going to remain the same. They're always going to have the variant topics. Like if they have 8 variant covers for this book, each line of variants is always going to have like a movie homage, a midnight version of an existing Marvel character. So that way you kind of know what variants they're going to be giving, what variants you can expect them to give, which I think is really cool. If you're someone that's a big horror fan like me, and you know that each month all 3 of the books are going to have a horror movie homage cover, I can go ahead and be looking forward to that instead of expecting to get only one, like out of every, you know, 2 or 3 issues or whatever. So I think that's really cool that they're letting the fans know you can expect these specific variants from us on each issue. Trying to think if there's anything else that popped up. I haven't gotten around to reading any of my books this week. Had in-laws stuff going on yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to get anything. So hopefully when I get back to the house, I can really get into reading some current books or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm almost done with my walk, but I want to wrap it up by saying again, thank you to everybody that watches, who hits like, who leaves a comment. You know, I always think that shit's really cool. It always gets me kind of excited. I get that little dopamine rush when I see the notification that I got when I open YouTube or whatever. So thanks again to everybody, and hope you guys have a good day. Stay safe out there, and hopefully you got a chance to read some good comics. Until next time, talk to you guys later. Bye bye.